Why should I have to vote for my senator? I already voted for my state senator. He knows what I like. Let him order for me.
If you went down the line of the candidates, the real answers would be, Real Housewives. I've been watching Real Housewives. Real Housewives. Real Housewives. Real Housewives. I'd be reading an economic textbook.
Tonight on Isaacology, the rise of satirical news.
Are they just making fun? Or a point?
Audio Jungle.
We'll find out tonight, but first, let's check in with our senior reporter, Kevin Yoon, who is at the scene live with more on this hot-button issue. Kevin?
Yeah, Isaac, I'm here in the heartland of the satirical news-watching population. Literally, every third word is either Colbert or Stewart.
Where exactly are you, Kevin?
Starbucks. The place is just swarming with Colbert's and Stewart's primary audience, adults under 30 years old. 43% of Colbert's audience is under the age of 30, and 39% of Jon Stewart's Daily Show audience falls into the same demographic. Yet those aged 18 to 29 comprise 23% of the nation's total population. And this young generation is arguably the most politically skeptical yet. A 2009 Rasmussen poll found that 40% of young Americans think that these types of shows are making traditional news sources obsolete. The credibility gap between the people and the United States government has widened tremendously in recent years. And the political stagnation in Washington is most definitely not helping. I'm here today with one such youth, Mark Tagliamonte. Mark, what do you think of the rise of news parodies like the Colbert Report and the Daily Show?
Yeah, I think these shows almost represent a rebellion of sorts, a way of our generation to express our discontent with politics these days. People like Colbert and Stewart are simply part of a long line of satirists throughout history, including people like Jonathan Swift, who realized that satire can be used as a tool for change. What makes these two different is the reach and presence they have, something that Swift would have never have dreamed of. By producing shows nightly, Colbert and Stewart are in constant contact with their audience and can keep their viewers engaged. Not to mention the fact that already around 2 million people watch Colbert nightly.
In fact, Colbert and Stewart have sometimes used their influence as a way to fund their own political projects as well, right?
Yeah, the Super PAC was obviously a big hit. Not only did it point out some of the absurdities in that court ruling, but it also helped raise money for charity. And I think that in some ways these guys have more impact and can do more for reform than actual politicians. They don't have to be subject to the will of the party like the people in Washington.
Thank you so much for your time, Mark. I think regardless of a political association, people can agree that shows like these are having a significant impact. Back to you guys at the studio. Boom!
Thanks, Kevin.
Well, I guess the obvious question is what makes the show so appealing? Obviously, there's humor involved, but it seems almost as if they know something that us traditional news stations do not.
These two hosts, Colbert and Stewart, they're masters of satire. And what makes it so believable is simply that they have replicated the feel of traditional news stations so well. Take a look at this clip.
As you can see, Colbert perfectly captures the sense of a typical news intro, albeit a bit more pronounced with his patriotism. The same goes for Stewart, whose intro is perhaps even a bit more believable.
Apart from their intros, the shows are littered with various satirical devices, like malapropism, in which they deliberately mispronounce words, like the names of various diplomats, and mock-heroic language, in which they apply high-sounding language to morally questionable characters. For example, look at this clip in which Colbert describes the recent debate over gun control.
I mean, what I think Rand Paul reminds us here is that grieving families aren't the real victims. Gun owners are. A point driven home by conservative radio host Bob Davis.
I'm sorry that you suffered a tragedy, but you know what? Deal with it and don't force me to lose my liberty, which is a greater tragedy than your loss.
Yes, the parents of Newtown only lost their children, but Bob Davis might have to fill out some forms at a gun show. That's a precious waste of time, time that could be spent yelling at people who have lost their children.
By depicting these inappropriate statements as part of a very noble cause, Colbert only further highlights their ridiculousness.
Another one of the signature devices the two employ is caricature, in which they create nicknames for subjects on the show based on their appearance. For example, take the way in which Colbert refers to Newt Gingrich.
Even worse, it was underneath this doodle.
By introducing him in this way, Colbert not only belittles a politician, but sets the tone for how he will treat the politician's latest remarks.
And finally, let's not forget their use of hyperbole and understatement. Perhaps the most obvious of the devices, yet at the same time, perhaps the most deadly. Take a look at this clip from Stewart, in which he criticizes Glenn Beck.
China is the new goal. Why do you think there's so many Maoists hanging around the White House?
You don't see it, do you? You still don't. Follow me, America. It turns out that progressives advocating for government regulations on toxins in water and our children's toys turns us into China.
As the most prominent devices of satire, hyperbole and understatement are used by Stewart and Colbert with such skill that they can put a politician's comments into perspective, despite being part of a world in which the soundbite is everything.
Wow, very impressive indeed, Alex. Very impressive. For all this joking around, it appears that Colbert's and Stewart's audiences are among the most educated citizens in the world. Check out these statistics that indicate that the audiences of these TV shows are even more globally aware than their counterparts who watch CNN.
Before we head out, let's send it over to Mark with the forecast.
Thanks, Alex. It looks like a bright future is ahead for these types of shows. Just recently, the Egyptian Jon Stewart Bassem Youssef was making headlines for his criticism of the Egyptian government and his subsequent arrest. As the world becomes increasingly connected via the internet, these shows are bound to spread to regions all over the globe, beyond just the United States. Their rise reflects an increasingly liberal global community, one that is willing to provide rights to minority groups that have long been oppressed. In fact, these shows will most likely play a key role in enacting the social change necessary for global equality.